The Galactic Council had rules for everything, especially for war. For 3,000 years, the advanced species of the galaxy fought their battles with honor and dignity. No one bombed civilian cities from orbit. No one used biological weapons that could wipe out entire populations. No one destroyed planets. Battles happened in space, between military fleets, and when someone surrendered, the fighting stopped immediately. Prisoners were treated well and returned home after the conflict ended. Every species in the Council agreed to these rules because they believed civilization meant controlling the worst impulses of war. Humanity joined the Galactic Council 40 years ago, and they accepted every rule without question. Admiral Jake Morrison commanded the UES Defiant, and he believed deeply in fighting honorably. He had spent 20 years of his career following the conventions and earning respect from alien commanders who initially doubted that humans could be trusted. Jake was proud of his record, and proud that humanity had proven themselves worthy of joining the galactic community. Then everything changed at New Haven. The colony world was home to 2 million human civilians who had left Earth to start fresh lives as farmers. They grew crops in rich soil under a gentle orange sun, and raised their children in peaceful communities far from the crowded cities of humanity's homeworld. New Haven had no military bases and no weapons factories. It was just farms and families living quiet lives. When the Vakrian Empire attacked the colony, the reason was purely strategic. New Haven sat near an important hyperspace route that the Vakrians wanted to control. Jake Morrison's fleet was patrolling nearby when the distress call came through. He immediately ordered his ships to New Haven and arrived to find a Vakrian battle fleet in orbit above the planet. The Vakrians had not yet fired on the surface, so Jake positioned his ships between the enemy and the colony world. He opened a communication channel and warned the Vakrians to withdraw or face battle. The Vakrian commander refused to leave, so the fighting began. Jake's fleet was slightly smaller, but human ships were faster and their weapons hit harder. The battle lasted 6 hours, and Jake's forces methodically destroyed half of the Vakrian fleet. Finally, the enemy commander sent a surrender signal, using the proper galactic protocols. Jake immediately ordered all human ships to cease firing and begin rescue operations. The conventions required that surrendering forces be treated humanely, and their survivors rescued from damaged ships. Jake's crew worked quickly to save Vakrian soldiers floating in escape pods. The human ships moved away from combat positions and focused entirely on rescue work. Medical teams prepared to treat wounded aliens. Everything was done exactly according to the rules that the Galactic Council had established over millennia. That was when the second Vakrian fleet appeared from behind New Haven's moon. They had been hiding there the entire time, waiting for exactly this moment. The surrender had been a trick to make the human fleet vulnerable. Jake realized the deception within seconds, but it was already too late. The hidden Vakrian ships ignored Morrison's fleet completely. Instead, they launched their weapons directly at New Haven's surface. 47 planet cracker missiles fell toward the colony world. These were the most terrible weapons in the galaxy, and every species had agreed never to use them. They were designed to break apart a planet's crust and cause catastrophic geological collapse. Jake screamed orders to intercept the missiles, but his ships were out of position and focused on rescue operations. Only 3 missiles were destroyed before the rest hit their targets. New Haven's crust shattered like glass. Massive earthquakes rippled across every continent simultaneously. Volcanoes erupted in chains thousands of miles long. The oceans boiled and turned to steam. Within 20 minutes, the entire planetary surface was collapsing into the mantle. 2 million people died, and there was nothing anyone could do to save them. Parents tried to shelter children who could not be sheltered from a planet tearing itself apart. Farmers who had never hurt anyone in their lives were swallowed by rivers of molten rock. The peaceful communities that families had built together simply ceased to exist. Jake Morrison watched it happen on his screens. He watched the surface temperature readings climb to levels that no living thing could survive. He watched the seismic data show the crust breaking into pieces. He watched the life sign readings drop from 2 million to 0 in less than 3 hours. His crew stood silent at their stations because there were no words for what they were witnessing. The Vakrian fleet that had launched the attack jumped to hyperspace and escaped before human forces could respond. The Vakrians in the escape pods that Jake's people had been rescuing just smiled and said nothing. The Galactic Council met in emergency session within hours. They condemned the Vakrian attack and called it a horrific tragedy. They passed sanctions against the Vakrian Empire and demanded that the officers responsible be arrested and tried for war crimes. They promised that justice would be served and that such an atrocity would never happen again. They spoke about honor and civilization and the importance of maintaining the conventions even in difficult times. Earth listened to all of this and decided the council was useless. Sanctions meant nothing to an empire that had just gained control of a strategic hyperspace route. Promises about justice meant nothing to 2 million dead civilians. Talk about honor meant nothing when the enemy had proven they would ignore every rule to win. Humanity had followed the conventions perfectly, and the price was New Haven burning. Commander Lisa Bennett sat in a briefing room aboard the UES Vengeance and watched footage from New Haven for the 18th time. She had cried during the first 17 viewings, but now she felt nothing except cold emptiness. She commanded one of humanity's newest warships, and she waited for orders that she knew would change everything. Around her, the other officers sat quietly and stared at screens showing the death of a world. General Paul Carter appeared on the main display. His face looked like it had been carved from stone. Behind him, the Earth Defense Council chamber was filled with activity as humanity's leaders made decisions that would reshape the galaxy. Carter spoke in a flat voice that allowed no argument or discussion. Human forces were immediately released from all galactic warfare conventions. The rules that had governed civilized combat for 3,000 years no longer applied to humanity. New orders were simple and clear. Win. Protect human lives. Eliminate threats. Use any means necessary. Admiral Morrison was being recalled and given command of a new fleet that would carry out Earth's response. His mission briefing contained exactly one sentence. Make them regret it. Commander Bennett looked at Lieutenant Kevin Price, who served as her tactical officer. She told him to gather all available intelligence on Vakrian civilian infrastructure, military academies, and command centers. Price hesitated and pointed out that those were non-military targets under the conventions. Bennett replied quietly that humanity was no longer following the conventions. The Vakrians had wanted to teach humans about total war. Now Earth would show them what happened when humanity stopped pretending to be civilized. She told Price to prepare firing solutions for every target and to assume that nothing was off limits anymore. 3 weeks later, the human fleet would arrive at Vakrian space. The galaxy was about to learn that some species only followed rules when everyone else did. When you broke that agreement, you faced something much worse than lawyers and sanctions. You faced survivors who would do absolutely anything to make sure it never happened again. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Vakrian territory exactly 3 weeks after New Haven died. 53 warships appeared in formation, with weapons already charged and targeting systems active. Each ship carried weapons that the Galactic Council had politely asked humanity not to develop. Kinetic kill vehicles that moved at fractions of light speed. Fusion bombs with yields that could crack moons. Automated attack drones that needed no crew to slow them down. Humanity had agreed to limit these weapons as a gesture of goodwill when joining the Council. That goodwill was gone now. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching his tactical display. The Vakrian border fleet was already moving to intercept the human ships. 200 Vakrian vessels against 53 human ones. The enemy clearly thought their numerical advantage would be enough. They were confident because they had always known humans to fight cautiously and follow proper protocols. They expected negotiations first, and then a carefully managed battle, with rules and honor. Lieutenant Amy Cross reported from the communications station that the Vakrians were sending hailing signals on all standard frequencies. Morrison told her to ignore every message. He was not interested in talking. Commander Lisa Bennett's voice came through the fleet command channel from the UES Vengeance. She confirmed that all ships had weapons-free status and target locks established. No warnings would be given and no negotiations would take place. The Vakrian commander apparently grew frustrated with being ignored because a text message appeared on Morrison's screen. It stated that the human fleet was violating galactic warfare conventions by refusing to communicate. The Vakrians demanded immediate withdrawal and threatened destruction if humans did not comply. The message claimed that the Vakrian Empire did not wish further conflict. Morrison deleted the message without reading past the first line. He had heard enough Vakrian lies to last a lifetime. He gave a single order: fire. What happened next would be analyzed by military strategists for centuries. The human ships did not maneuver into complex formations. They did not attempt flanking movements or clever tactical tricks. They simply accelerated forward at maximum burn and fired everything they had. Kinetic rounds, moving at 40% of light speed, tore through Vakrian shields like they did not exist. The aliens had designed their defenses for energy weapons and guided missiles that could be deflected or confused. Solid tungsten cylinders traveling at relativistic speeds could not be stopped. They could barely be detected before they hit. Vakrian ships exploded so quickly that their crews had no time to understand what was killing them. Within 7 minutes, 60 enemy vessels were nothing but expanding clouds of debris. The beautiful formations that the Vakrians had maintained dissolved into chaos. Some ships tried to flee, while others attempted to signal surrender. Morrison watched it all, with dead eyes. Lieutenant Cross reported multiple surrender signals coming from the surviving Vakrian ships. Her voice was uncertain as she waited for orders. Morrison's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed flat. He told her to continue firing. Cross looked at him with confusion. Lieutenant Greg Foster at the weapons station turned in his chair to stare at the Admiral. Morrison repeated his order. Continue firing. Ignore all surrender signals. Foster asked if the Admiral was certain about the order. Morrison reminded him that the Vakrians had surrendered at New Haven too. They had sent proper signals and followed correct protocols right before murdering 2 million civilians. He asked Foster if he wanted to fall for the same trick twice. Foster's hand hesitated over his console for 3 seconds before he pressed the firing controls. More Vakrian ships died. These ones had been trying to surrender, but they exploded anyway. The bridge went completely silent except for the hum of charging weapons and the quiet beeps of targeting computers. Every officer present understood that they were crossing a line that could never be uncrossed. They were executing enemies who had surrendered. Under any interpretation of galactic law, this was murder. Under human law, after New Haven, it was justice. Commander Bennett's voice came through on Morrison's private channel. She said that the Galactic Council was going to lose their minds when they learned what had happened here. Morrison replied that he did not care what the Council thought. He ordered Bennett to take her wing and proceed to target Sigma-7. There was a pause before Bennett asked for confirmation. Sigma-7 was a military academy world, with confirmed civilian presence in nearby cities. Morrison confirmed the order. The target was a military academy, which made it a legitimate military target under the new rules. Bennett was to proceed and eliminate it. 10 human ships broke away from the main fleet and vanished into hyperspace. Behind them, the Vakrian border fleet ceased to exist as a fighting force. Not a single escape pod was recovered. Not a single enemy ship was allowed to retreat with news of what had happened. The humans were making sure that no warning would reach deeper into Vakrian territory. Morrison watched his tactical display clear of all enemy contacts. Somewhere deep inside him, the officer who had believed in honor and proper warfare was screaming. That officer had died along with his daughter Emma on New Haven. She had retired from military service to become a farmer. She had called him every week to talk about crops and neighbors and the peaceful life she was building. She had survived combat missions and earned medals for bravery only to die when her planet cracked apart. Morrison felt nothing now except cold determination. He ordered navigation to plot a course for Vakria Prime. He told his fleet to prepare for orbital assault. Someone needed to contact the Council ambassador because Morrison wanted them to watch. He wanted every species in the galaxy to see exactly what humans did when you taught them to stop being civilized. Lieutenant Price spoke quietly from his station. He pointed out that Vakria Prime was the Vakrian homeworld with 60 billion inhabitants. He asked if the fleet was actually planning to attack a homeworld with that many civilians. Morrison turned to look at Price. The lieutenant's words died in his throat when he saw the expression on the admiral's face. Morrison said that the Vakrians had cracked a planet with 2 million of humanity's people on it. Did Price think the Vakrians would stop unless they were made afraid? Unless they learned that breaking the rules did not give them an advantage. Breaking the rules meant facing extinction. Morrison turned back to his view screen and watched stars begin to streak past as the ship entered hyperspace. He spoke quietly to himself, or perhaps to the ghost of his daughter. No one would ever touch Earth's children again. Not ever. The price for trying would be too terrible for any species to pay. Commander Bennett stood on her bridge, approaching Sigma 7. The military academy below had trained Vakrian officers for 3 centuries. Some of the commanders who had destroyed New Haven had graduated from this academy. Now it would be removed from existence. Bennett gave the order, and Lieutenant Danny Roberts counted down each missile impact. His voice was mechanical and emotionless. 3,000 cadets were inside the academy when it was hit. The building, and everyone in it, simply vanished in overlapping fireballs. The attack was precise enough to avoid the civilian city 20 kilometers away. Bennett wondered if future historians would give humanity credit for that restraint, or if it would even matter. She received a transmission from Galactic Council Arbiter Junkar, who appeared as a holographic insect. The alien's mandibles clicked with agitation, as it called the attack an outrage. Those had been students, not soldiers. Bennett replied coldly that they were officers in training. The same academy produced the commanders who cracked New Haven. Junkar protested that the responsible Vakrian officers had been arrested and sanctions were being implemented. Bennett said it was too late and not enough. The council had 3,000 years to enforce their conventions. They only started caring when human bodies were being vaporized. The Arbiter warned that Admiral Morrison was heading for Vakria Prime and surely humanity was not planning to attack a homeworld. That would cross a line from which there was no return. Bennett felt something break inside her chest. She thought about footage from New Haven. Parents trying to shelter children from a planet falling apart. She told the Arbiter that the Vakrians had crossed that line first. Humanity was just walking the path that had been shown to them. She cut the transmission before the alien could respond. The human fleet regrouped and continued toward Vakria Prime. Every officer in the fleet knew what was coming. They were going to show the galaxy that human mercy had limits. That human patience could be exhausted. That humanity could become something far more terrible than any alien species if pushed hard enough. The age of civilized warfare was ending. The age of human deterrence was about to begin. Admiral Jake Morrison sat alone in his quarters, staring at a photograph he had kept locked away since New Haven burned. His daughter Emma smiled at the camera while standing in front of the farmhouse she had bought on the colony world. Behind her, golden grain stretched to the horizon under an alien sun that would never rise again. Emma had been so proud of that farm. She called every week to tell him about the crops and the neighbors and the community they were building together. A new life far from Earth's crowded cities and far from war. The picture frame cracked in Morrison's grip. He set it down carefully on his desk with shaking hands. 3 weeks of rage had not made the grief any easier. If anything, the pain grew worse each day because destroying Vakrian ships did not bring Emma back. Nothing would bring her back. The door to his quarters chimed, and he told whoever it was to enter. Commander Lisa Bennett came in wearing a crisp uniform, but her face showed exhaustion that went deeper than lack of sleep. She said they needed to talk. The Galactic Council was mobilizing their peacekeeping fleet. They were calling what humanity was doing genocide. Morrison poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed one to Bennett. He asked if she knew that Emma had been 32 years old. She had survived the academy and 3 combat deployments and earned a Bronze Star for valor. Then she retired to grow wheat. Morrison's voice cracked as he spoke. Emma had died growing food while humanity was busy following the Council's rules about civilized warfare. What was civilized about planet crackers? What was civilized about murdering 2 million farmers because it was convenient for winning a battle? Bennett said quietly that nothing about it was civilized, but she asked if what they were about to do made humanity any better than the Vakrians. Morrison drained his whiskey in one swallow. He said no. That was exactly the point. The Vakrians wanted to fight dirty, so humanity would show them what dirty really meant. They would make the Vakrians so terrified that they would never touch another human world. Not because they respected the rules, but because they were too afraid to break them. Bennett said the Council would never allow it. Their fleet would arrive in 6 hours, and they would try to stop humanity from attacking Vakria Prime. Morrison pulled up his tactical display. 4 hours remained on the countdown he had given the Vakrians to evacuate their homeworld. He said that if the Council tried to interfere, they would learn the same lesson the Vakrians were learning. Bennett asked if there had been any response from the Vakrian government. Morrison was told that the Vakrians were calling humanity's threat a bluff. They said no species had ever deliberately destroyed another's homeworld. They thought humans were posturing and would back down. Morrison laughed bitterly. The Vakrians still did not understand what they were dealing with. They thought humans were like other species, who were bound by ancient codes of conduct. They did not realize that humans only followed rules when everyone else did. When you broke that social contract, humans were not civilized anymore. They were survivors. And survivors did whatever it took to keep surviving. Bennett took a sip of whiskey and said she used to think she knew the difference between justice and revenge. Morrison told her that justice was what the strong told the weak to accept. Revenge was what you got when you were strong enough to take it. The galaxy was about to learn which one humanity was. His console beeped with an urgent message. Lieutenant Kevin Price's face appeared on screen looking pale. He reported that they were detecting mass launches from Vakria Prime's surface. Analysis showed these were not evacuation ships. They were missile carriers armed with planet crackers. Morrison and Bennett stared at each other. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. Morrison demanded trajectory information. Price said they were still computing, but preliminary data showed the missiles were targeting human colonies. All of them. Every registered human settlement in this entire sector of space. If all the missiles hit their targets, humanity would lose 40 billion people. The Vakrians were not surrendering. They were escalating. If they were going to lose their homeworld, they intended to make humanity pay the same price. Bennett's whiskey glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the deck. She said they had to stop the missiles. They had to intercept them before they reached the colonies. Morrison told her quietly that they did not have enough ships. Even if they sent every vessel at maximum speed, they could maybe save 1/4 of the targets. The rest of the missiles would get through. Morrison's hands moved across his console with terrible precision. He pulled up firing solutions that Lieutenant Danny Roberts had calculated days ago. These were the coordinates for Vakria Prime's geological stress points, places where planet crackers would cause maximum damage to the crust. He opened a channel to the entire fleet. All ships were to execute Omega Protocol immediately. Do not wait for the countdown to finish. Fire now. Lieutenant Price protested from his station. If they fired now, the evacuation ships would not be clear. Millions of Vakrian civilians were still trying to escape the planet. Morrison's finger hovered over the confirmation button. In his mind, he saw Emma's farm burning. He saw 2 million people just like her dying because warfare had rules until someone decided to ignore those rules. He said quietly that the Vakrians had launched first. They made their choice. Now, humanity would make theirs. Morrison pressed the button. 23 human warships opened fire at the same moment. Planet cracker missiles streaked down through Vakria Prime's atmosphere, leaving burning trails across the sky. They struck in a precise mathematical pattern calculated to create cascading tectonic failures. Bennett watched her tactical display with a frozen expression. On the planet's surface, evacuation ships, still climbing toward orbit, were caught in the shockwaves. The ships tumbled and burned, and fell back into the hell that was consuming their world. Continental plates buckled and tore like paper. Oceans boiled away into steam. Cities that had stood for thousands of years collapsed into cracks in the ground. The Vakrian homeworld began to die, and it was dying because humanity had killed it. 60 billion people lived on that world, and not all of them would escape. Not even close. Bennett whispered that God should forgive them for what they had done. Morrison replied that God would not forgive them, but maybe 2 million ghosts would understand. The missiles that the Vakrians had launched continued on their trajectories toward human colonies. The human fleet split apart as ships raced desperately to intercept as many as possible. Every captain knew they could not save everyone. They could only save as many as time and distance allowed. Crews worked without rest, calculating intercept courses and preparing weapons. They were fighting to save their own families now. Fighting to prevent New Haven from happening 40 more times. The Galactic Council's peacekeeping fleet was still 2 hours away from Vakria Prime. They were accelerating as fast as their ships could manage, but they would arrive too late to stop anything. Commander Thelvar of the peacekeeping force watched his sensors and saw the data coming in from the Vakrian homeworld. The planet was breaking apart. Billions were dying, and human ships were spreading across the sector, chasing down missiles in a desperate race against time. Thelvar's officers asked if they should intervene. The commander watched human destroyers executing precision strikes on every remaining Vakrian military installation. Every base, every shipyard, every weapons platform. The Vakrians were not surrendering. They could not surrender. Their homeworld was dying. Their command structure had collapsed. Thelvar told his officers no. Humanity had tried following the rules, and the result was New Haven. The Council had condemned that attack and done nothing meaningful. Now humanity was doing what the Council should have done, making sure it never happened again. 3 hours passed. Reports came in from across human space. Some colonies had been saved. Columbia Prime was safe because Commander Bennett's wing had intercepted the missiles targeting it. 500 million lives saved. New Boston was not as lucky. The planet cracker hit before human ships could arrive. 3 billion dead. Terra Verde survived. Sanctuary did not. The numbers rolled in, and each one represented unimaginable tragedy or miraculous salvation. When the counting was finished, humanity had lost 8 billion people. Added to the 2 million from New Haven, the total was staggering. The largest loss of life that humanity had ever suffered. But it would have been 40 billion if the fleet had not acted. If Morrison had not fired on Vakria Prime immediately. If he had waited for the countdown to finish, the missiles would have hit their targets before human ships could intercept. Morrison sat in his quarters and looked at those numbers. 8 billion dead. An entire species' homeworld shattered. The Vakrian Empire effectively destroyed. 3,000 years of galactic civilization torn apart in a few terrible hours. He poured another glass of whiskey and raised it to Emma's photograph. He told her that he had made them pay. He had made them all pay. He asked if she thought it was enough. The photograph did not answer. It never would. Emma was gone, and revenge had not brought her back. But maybe the 40 billion people who were still alive because of what he did would remember why it happened. Maybe they would understand that monsters were made and not born. That humanity had tried to be civilized, and the galaxy had punished them for it. Outside his window, Vakria Prime was a broken marble bleeding magma into space. The age of rules and honor was finished. The age of human warfare had begun. And the galaxy would never forget the price of teaching humanity that civilization was a lie. Commander Thelvar of the Galactic Council peacekeeping fleet stood on his bridge watching the aftermath of something the galaxy had never seen before. Vakria Prime hung in space like a broken egg. 7 massive cracks split the planet's crust, and magma bled into the void, leaving trails of cooling rock that would eventually form rings around the dead world. 60 billion people had lived there 3 days ago. Now the planet could support no life at all. The atmosphere was burning off. The oceans were gone. Cities that had stood for millennia were buried under kilometers of volcanic debris. The human fleet had scattered across this sector of space, chasing down Vakrion missiles in a desperate attempt to save their own colonies. Thelvar's sensors showed the results of that chase. The humans had managed to intercept 80% of the planet crackers. That was an incredible achievement, given how little time they had and how spread out the targets were. But 20% of the missiles had gotten through to their destinations. 8 billion human civilians were dead. Cities that had thrived yesterday were craters today. Thelvar's tactical officer asked again if they should intervene in what the humans were doing. The peacekeeping fleet had arrived too late to stop the attack on Vakria Prime, but human ships were still active across Vakrian territory. They were systematically destroying every military installation they could find. Shipyards were being blown apart. Weapons platforms were being reduced to scrap. Space stations that had already surrendered were being fired upon anyway. The humans were not taking prisoners, and they were not accepting surrenders. Thelvar watched a human destroyer unleash kinetic rounds on a Vakrian research station. The station had broadcast surrender on all frequencies. The humans fired anyway. The station broke apart, and everyone aboard died. Thelvar told his officer, "No, the peacekeeping fleet would not intervene." The Council had created this situation by allowing the Vakrians to massacre 2 million humans at New Haven. The Council had issued stern statements and passed meaningless sanctions. Now, the Council would watch humanity do what should have been done from the beginning. Make the cost of breaking the rules too terrible for anyone to accept. Admiral Jake Morrison received casualty reports in his quarters. Each report was another knife in his heart. New Boston gone. Terra Verde saved. Sanctuary gone. Columbia Prime saved. The names scrolled past on his screen, and each one represented billions of lives either saved or lost. 8 billion dead in total. That number would have been 40 billion. If his fleet had not acted immediately, if he had waited even another hour before firing on Vakria Prime, the Vakrian missiles would have hit before his ships could intercept. Morrison had saved 32 billion people by killing millions. History would decide if that made him a hero or a monster. Right now, he did not care which. Commander Lisa Bennett stood on the bridge of the UES Vengeance looking at her own reports. Her wing had saved Columbia Prime. 500 million people were alive because she had calculated the intercept course correctly and gotten there in time. But Lieutenant Danny Roberts was not alive to see it. His console had overloaded during the frantic maneuvers, and he had died at his station still calculating firing solutions, still trying to save just one more colony. Bennett had Roberts' personal effects in a box in her quarters. She would have to write a letter to his family, explaining how he died and why it mattered. Roberts had told her about his sister who taught at an elementary school on New Haven. His sister had sent him drawings that her students made of spaceships. Roberts had kept those drawings in his locker and looked at them every day. Now his sister was dead, and Roberts was dead, and the children who drew those pictures were dead. But Columbia Prime was alive. Bennett wondered if that was enough. If saving 500 million balanced out losing the people you loved. She suspected the answer was no, but it was all they had. The Galactic Council fleet sent another hailing request. Bennett told her communications officer to put it through. Commander Thelvar appeared on the screen. The alien's multiple eyes blinked in what might have been distress. He said that on behalf of the Galactic Council, he was there to negotiate an end to this conflict. The Vakrian Empire had effectively ceased to exist. Further destruction served no purpose. Bennett replied that Thelvar was correct. The war was over. But now came the hard part. Every species in the galaxy would sign a new treaty. One with real enforcement mechanisms. One with actual consequences for breaking the rules. If anyone used planet crackers on civilian targets or launched total war against non-combatants, then humanity would respond with exactly what they had done to the Vakrians. Total annihilation. No negotiations. No mercy. No second chances. No meaningless sanctions. and stern letters. Thelvar's appendages clicked nervously. He said that humanity could not hold the entire galaxy hostage with threats. Bennett told him that humanity was not holding anyone hostage. They were offering protection. Follow the rules, and you are safe. Break the rules, and face humanity. Think of it as the galaxy finally having an enforcer. A species willing to do the ugly work that everyone else wanted done but nobody wanted to do themselves. Thelvar protested that this was not justice. This was tyranny. Admiral Morrison's voice cut into the channel. He said that tyranny was what the Vakrians had tried to do at New Haven. This was deterrence. This was the galaxy learning that human lives were not cheap, and human mercy was not weakness. Humanity had tried being civilized. They followed every rule in the book. 10 billion of their people died for it. That would never happen again. If that made humanity the villains in the history books, then so be it. Better to be feared than to bury more billions. Morrison told Thelvar that the Council had 48 hours to present a new treaty framework to all member species. Anyone who refused to sign would get no protection from humanity if they were attacked. But they also would get no mercy from humanity if they attacked someone else. Humanity was done asking permission to defend themselves. The transmission ended before Thelvar could respond. In the days that followed, the galaxy struggled with its new reality. The Galactic Council called emergency sessions that lasted for weeks. Species that had always relied on the peacekeeping fleet to protect them suddenly realized that fleet was useless against an enemy willing to ignore all the rules. The Vakrian attack on New Haven had proven that determination to win could defeat superior numbers if you were willing to pay the moral price. Humanity's response had proven that the moral price could be turned against you. The debate in the council chambers was fierce. Some species argued that bowing to human demands would set a terrible precedent. Others pointed out that the precedent had been set at New Haven and humanity was simply responding to it. A few tried to argue that the Vakrians were an exception, and most species would never do what they did. Those voices were shouted down by species who remembered their own histories. Every civilization had factions willing to win at any cost. The question was whether the cost would be high enough to stop them. 3 weeks after Vakria Prime broke apart, the new treaty was ready. It was shorter than the old conventions because it did not need to be complicated. The rules were the same as they had always been. No planet crackers on civilian worlds. No total war against non-combatants. No biological or chemical weapons. Honor surrenders and treat prisoners humanely. But the enforcement clause was new, and it was simple. Any species that violated these rules would face immediate military response from humanity with no limitations and no mercy. Earth was the enforcer now. 53 species signed the treaty immediately. These were the ones who had always followed the rules anyway, and who were relieved that someone was finally willing to enforce them. 20 species hesitated but signed within days after their populations demanded it. Nobody wanted to be the next Vakrians. 8 species refused to sign. They claimed that submitting to human authority was unacceptable. Morrison gave them a simple response. Fine. You are on your own. If someone attacks you, we will not help. If you attack someone else, we will destroy you. 6 months later, one of the species that refused to sign attacked a mining colony belonging to one of the species that had signed. The attack killed 3,000 miners in a dispute over resource rights. The human response fleet arrived within 30 hours. Morrison gave the attacking species exactly one chance to surrender their government and accept occupation. They refused. Their homeworld was blockaded and their military was systematically destroyed over a period of 2 weeks. Their government surrendered when human ships began targeting infrastructure that their civilian population needed to survive. Food distribution centers, water treatment plants, power generation facilities. The message was clear. Surrender or watch your people starve. That species signed the treaty. So did the remaining 7, who had refused. Nobody wanted to test whether humanity was bluffing. The galaxy learned that humanity did not bluff. Admiral Morrison retired 6 months after the Vakrian War ended. He had done what needed to be done, and he could not do it anymore. The weight of billions of deaths was crushing him. He returned to Earth and bought a farm in Kansas. He grew wheat under a yellow sun just like Emma had grown wheat under an orange sun. Every morning, he stood in his fields and thought about his daughter, about the price they had paid, about the price he had made others pay, about whether any of it was worth it. He never reached a conclusion. Some days he thought he had saved humanity from extinction. Other days, he thought he had turned humanity into the thing they had always feared becoming. Most days he just tried not to think about it at all. He grew wheat and watched the sky and waited to see what the galaxy would do with the new order he had created. Commander Lisa Bennett took command of the Human Defense Fleet after Admiral Morrison retired. She understood why he needed to leave. The man had carried the weight of billions of deaths, and that weight never got lighter. It only got heavier with time. Now that weight was hers to carry. She stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching patrol routes displayed on tactical screens. Human ships were scattered across 36 sectors enforcing the new treaty, making sure everyone remembered the rules, making sure everyone understood the consequences of breaking those rules. The galaxy had changed in ways both obvious and subtle. The most obvious change was that wars had become rare. Border disputes that would have escalated to shooting matches now got resolved through negotiation. Species that might have tested each other's resolve now backed down rather than risk bringing human attention. The threat of overwhelming force was enough to keep most conflicts from starting. Bennett found this darkly amusing. The galaxy had spent 3,000 years talking about civilized warfare, and it took humanity's willingness to be completely uncivilized to actually create peace. The subtle changes were more interesting. Species that had always relied on the Galactic Council's peacekeeping fleet now invested in their own defenses, not to fight wars but to prove they could protect themselves if humanity ever decided to turn on them. Trust in human restraint only went so far. Bennett did not blame them for being cautious. She would not trust humanity either if she were an alien species. A civilization that had destroyed an entire homeworld in response to an attack was a civilization that needed to be handled carefully. 5 years after the Vakrian War ended, Bennett received a call from a species she had never heard of. The Zenthari Republic was reporting that one of their colony worlds had been attacked by raiders. The raiders were using weapons that violated the treaty. Biological agents that caused horrible deaths. The Zenthari were requesting human intervention under the treaty terms. Bennett pulled up information on the Zenthari and found that they had signed the treaty within hours of it being offered. They had been enthusiastic supporters of the new order. Bennett dispatched a response fleet within 2 hours. The ships arrived at the raided Zenthari colony to find hundreds dead from the biological attack. The investigation traced the raiders back to a criminal organization operating from an independent station in neutral space. The station claimed sovereignty and refused to surrender anyone. Bennett gave them 6 hours to turn over the raiders and destroy their biological weapons. The station's leaders sent back a message full of legal arguments about jurisdiction and sovereignty. Bennett reduced the station to debris. 3,000 criminals died along with the raiders she wanted. The Galactic Council protested that the station had not been given enough time to comply. Bennett replied that 6 hours was more time than the Vakrian missiles gave to the colonies they hit. The Council dropped their protest. The criminal networks across the galaxy suddenly became very interested in avoiding biological weapons. Humanity had proven they would enforce the treaty against anyone, regardless of legal technicalities. Sovereignty meant nothing if you broke the rules. Lieutenant Kevin Price commanded his own ship now. The UES Guardian patrolled border regions, watching for treaty violations. Price thought often about the early days of the war, about the moment when Admiral Morrison ordered them to ignore Vakrian surrender signals, about watching Vakria Prime break apart, about the choice between being civilized and being safe. He had been horrified at the time. Now he understood. A young ensign asked Price one day if humanity had been right to do what they did to the Vacrians. Price considered the question carefully. He said that right and wrong stopped mattering the day New Haven died. All that mattered now was making sure it never happened again. To anyone. That was what humanity bought. With Vacria Prime. Not justice. Not honor. Just the cold certainty that the rules applied to everyone or they applied to no one. Humanity made the galaxy choose which one it wanted. The galaxy chose rules. When the alternative was facing humanity in total war, most species decided that following conventions was preferable. Border conflicts still happened, but they stayed limited. Disputes over resources got arbitrated rather than fought over. The Galactic Council actually gained power because species needed a neutral forum for resolving disagreements. Nobody wanted disagreements to escalate to the point where human ships showed up. There were still problems. A species called the Krell Dominion tested the treaty 7 years after Vacria Prime. They used chemical weapons on a disputed moon, claiming that the moon was uninhabited. Intelligence showed that 300 scientists lived on that moon studying the native ecosystem. All 300 died when the Krell deployed nerve agents. Bennett's fleet arrived within 48 hours. The Krell government tried to negotiate, claiming the attack was a mistake by a rogue military unit. Bennett gave them the same response Morrison had given the Vacrians. She did not care about explanations. She did not care about rogue units or mistakes. The treaty was clear. Use banned weapons and face destruction. The Krell could surrender their government and submit to occupation, or they could fight. The Krell chose to fight. Their fleet lasted 6 days against human forces. Their government surrendered when Bennett began targeting their food production infrastructure. The Krell learned what the Vacrians had learned. Humanity did not negotiate when the rules were broken. The Krell Dominion signed a new agreement accepting permanent human monitoring of their military. They paid reparations to the families of the 300 scientists. Their entire government was replaced through elections supervised by neutral observers. It was humiliating for a proud species, but it was better than extinction. Other species watched and learned. The treaty had teeth. Those teeth would bite anyone who tested them. Admiral Morrison stood in his wheat fields watching the sun set over Kansas. He was older now, gray hair and deep lines around his eyes. The farm was doing well. He sold his wheat to distributors who shipped it off-world. He found dark humor in the fact that his grain might end up feeding people on Vacrian refugee colonies. The survivors of the homeworld he destroyed eating food he grew. History had a sense of irony. Bennett visited him sometimes when her patrols brought her near Earth. They would sit on Morrison's porch drinking coffee and talking about the state of the galaxy. Morrison always asked the same question. Was it worth it? Did destroying Vacria Prime actually make things better? Or did it just make humanity into the new villains? Bennett gave the same answer every time. The galaxy was safer now than it had been in centuries. Wars were rare. Atrocities were almost non-existent. Billions of people lived peaceful lives because they knew the rules would be enforced. Morrison would nod and stare at his fields. He would say that 32 billion people were alive because he fired on Vacria Prime immediately instead of waiting. But 8 billion died anyway. Plus, however many Vacrians died when their homeworld broke apart. The math never came out clean. You could not balance lives against each other like numbers in an equation. Each death was infinite loss to someone. But you still had to make the choice. Fire now and save who you can, or wait and lose everyone. Bennett understood his struggle. She carried her own weight from decisions made in those terrible days. Lieutenant Roberts, dying at his station. The cadets at Sigma 7 Academy. The Vacrian evacuation ships caught in the shockwave. You could justify every decision with logic and still wake up at night seeing their faces. The price of keeping the galaxy safe was living with what you had done to make it that way. Lieutenant Price was promoted to captain after successfully negotiating an end to a border dispute that could have turned violent. His ship had been patrolling between two species, who both claimed the same asteroid field. Tensions were rising, and both sides were moving military ships into position. Price positioned his ship directly between the two fleets and broadcast a simple message. The first side to fire would be treated as breaking the treaty. Human ships would respond within hours. Both sides would be held equally responsible. The dispute went to arbitration and was resolved peacefully. Price received commendations for his handling of the situation. He accepted them with mixed feelings. Part of him was proud that he had prevented violence. Part of him was disturbed by how easy it was. He just had to threaten overwhelming force, and everyone backed down. The galaxy was peaceful because everyone was afraid. Fear was effective, but Price wondered what happened when the fear faded, when a new generation grew up who had never seen Vakria Prime and did not understand why the rules mattered. Would humanity have to break another homeworld to remind them? 20 years after the Vakrian War, the galaxy held a memorial service. It was held in neutral space, at coordinates that had been carefully chosen to be equidistant from all major homeworlds. Representatives from every species came to remember what had happened, to honor the dead from New Haven and from Vakria Prime, to acknowledge the terrible price that had been paid to create the current peace. Admiral Morrison was invited to speak, but he declined. He sent a written statement instead. It said that he hoped the memorial would help people remember, not just the deaths, but why they happened. Breaking the rules had consequences. Civilization only worked if everyone participated. Commander Bennett attended the memorial in Morrison's place. She stood at the podium, looking out at thousands of beings from hundreds of species. She spoke about Lieutenant Roberts and the other humans who had died defending their homes. She spoke about the Vakrian civilians who died in the destruction of their homeworld. She spoke about the choice between being civilized and being safe. How humanity had tried civilization first and watched 2 million people die. How the response had saved billions, but cost millions. Bennett ended her speech with a simple statement. The memorial existed to honor the dead and to remind the living. The rules were written in blood, and they would be enforced in blood if necessary. Not because humanity wanted to be enforcers. Because someone had to do it. Because 3,000 years of gentle words and mild sanctions had failed. Because in the end, the only thing that stopped violence was the certainty of worse violence in return. It was an ugly truth. But truth did not care about being pretty. The galaxy accepted this. Some species did so reluctantly. Others did so with relief. But everyone accepted it because the alternative had been proven at New Haven. The alternative was watching helpless while your people died, and the perpetrators faced nothing more than diplomatic condemnation. Humanity had shown that there was another option. Make the price so high that no one would pay it. Make the consequences so severe that no one would risk them. Admiral Morrison died peacefully in his sleep at age 78. He was buried on his farm in Kansas with full military honors. Representatives from dozens of species attended his funeral. Even some Vakrians came to pay respects. They understood that Morrison had saved their species even while destroying their homeworld. If he had not responded so decisively, the entire Vakrian race would have been exterminated by the human fleet. By breaking their homeworld, but allowing evacuation, he had given them a future. It was a terrible future, but it was more than they would have had otherwise. Commander Bennett took over Morrison's position as senior human military advisor to the Galactic Council. She spent the rest of her career working to make sure the treaty stayed strong, training the next generation of officers who would enforce it, teaching them when to show mercy and when to strike without hesitation. The balance was delicate. Too much mercy, and the rules became meaningless. Too much force and humanity became tyrants. Finding that balance was the work of decades. The galaxy remained at peace. Not perfect peace. There were still conflicts and disputes and occasional violence. But the age of total war was over. The age of planet crackers and biological weapons and systematic atrocity was finished. Because humanity had shown what happened when you crossed those lines. The lesson had been written in fire and blood across the broken surface of Vakria Prime. Every species that looked at the astronomical charts saw that dead world. A reminder, a warning, a promise. Earth's answer to the massacre had been simple and terrible. No more civilized battles. No more pretending that rules mattered when nobody enforced them. Just the cold certainty that breaking faith with civilization would bring destruction. It was not the answer anyone wanted, but it was the answer that kept the galaxy alive. And in the end, that was all that mattered.
The space station hung in the darkness like a giant metal flower. Nexus Prime was the biggest neutral meeting place in the galaxy. Ships from 100 different worlds docked at its arms every day. Today was different, though. Today, the most important person from Earth was coming to make peace. President Catherine Bell looked out the window of her ship as they approached the station. She was 52 years old with gray hair and kind eyes. For 10 years, she had led Earth as its first planetary president. The people loved her because she always tried to do what was right. "Are you nervous, Madam President?" asked Commander Jake Morrison. He was her head of security, a tall man with short brown hair and serious blue eyes. He had been a soldier for 20 years and had never lost anyone under his protection. "A little," Catherine said with a small smile. "But this is too important to let fear stop us. If we can make peace with the Galactic Council, our children will grow up in a better universe." Jake nodded but kept his hand near his weapon. Something felt wrong about this meeting. The Council had been friendly to humans for years, but lately things had changed. Earth's colonies were growing fast. Human technology was getting better every month. Maybe the aliens were getting scared. Their ship docked with a soft bump. Catherine straightened her blue suit and picked up her briefcase. Inside were the peace treaties that would make Earth an official member of the Galactic Council. She had worked on these papers for 2 years. The airlock opened with a hiss. Ambassador Zeth Ka of the Zephyrian Empire waited for them. He was 8 feet tall with purple skin and 4 arms. His species had ruled this part of the galaxy for 1,000 years. "President Bell," Zeth Ka said in perfect English. His voice sounded like music, but his yellow eyes were cold. "Welcome to Nexus Prime. The Council is eager to meet with you." "Thank you, Ambassador," Catherine replied. "I hope today marks the beginning of a new friendship between our peoples." They walked through the station's corridors. Jake stayed close to the president, watching everything. Other aliens stopped to stare at the humans. Some looked curious. Others looked angry. A few looked afraid. The meeting room was huge with a round table in the center. Representatives from 12 different alien species sat around it. Catherine recognized most of them from her studies. The crystalline collective sparkled like living diamonds. The gas beings floated in special suits. The machine lords clicked and whirred with each movement. "Please take your seat," said Chancellor Vexmore, the leader of the council. He was from the same species as Zeth Ka, but even bigger. "We have much to discuss." Catherine sat down and opened her briefcase. "I have brought the treaties we discussed. Earth is ready to join the galactic community as a peaceful partner." The aliens looked at each other. Something passed between them that Catherine could not understand. Chancellor Vexmore leaned forward. "President Bell, we have been watching your species for some time. Humans are interesting. You learn fast. You build quickly. You spread to new worlds like a virus. We explore because we are curious," Catherine said. "We build because we want to make life better for everyone." "Do you?" asked another alien, one with tentacles instead of arms. "Your warships are faster than ours. Your weapons are more powerful. Your colonies produce more resources than planets that have been settled for centuries." Jake felt his muscles tense. This was not going the way they had planned. Catherine kept her voice calm. "We share our technology with everyone. We have never attacked another species. We want to be friends, not enemies." "That is the problem," Chancellor Vexmore said. "You are too good at everything. In 50 years, humans will be stronger than all of us combined. We cannot allow that to happen." The room grew quiet. Catherine felt her heart beating faster. "What are you saying?" "We are saying that humanity must be stopped before it is too late." The Chancellor stood up. "But do not worry. We do not plan to destroy your species. We only need to remove your leader. Without you, The humans will fight among themselves. They will be weak and easy to control. Jake was already moving, but it was too late. The lights went out. In the darkness, energy weapons fired. Jake heard Catherine scream his name. He tried to reach her, but something hit him in the chest and sent him flying across the room. When the lights came back on, Catherine was on the floor. Blood pooled around her head. Jake crawled to her, ignoring the pain in his ribs. "Catherine." He lifted her head gently. Her eyes were still open, but they were getting dim. "Jake," she whispered. "Tell them. Tell our people. This is not the end. Humans do not forgive. Humans do not forget." "You are going to be okay," Jake said, but he knew it was a lie. The weapon had hit her in the chest. There was too much blood. "Promise me," Catherine said. Her voice was so quiet he had to lean close to hear. "Promise me they will pay for this." "Promise," Jake said. Catherine Bell, president of Earth and Hope for Human-Alien Friendship, died in Jake's arms 30 seconds later. Chancellor Vexmore looked down at them without emotion. "Broadcast this across the galaxy. Let every species see what happens to those who threaten the natural order. The humans will surrender within a week." Jake looked up at the alien leader. His eyes were filled with tears, but also with something else. Something that made the Chancellor take a step back. "You have no idea what you have just done," Jake said quietly. "You think you know humans, but you do not. You just killed the one person who could have kept us peaceful. Now you will see what we are really like when someone hurts our family." The aliens laughed, but their laughter sounded nervous. They had just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. They had turned humanity's greatest friend into their greatest enemy, and they had no idea what was coming for them. The news reached Earth in 4 hours. Every screen on the planet showed the same terrible image. President Catherine Bell lying dead on the floor of Nexus Prime, while alien leaders stood over her body. The Galactic Council had broadcast it to every world in the galaxy as a warning. They wanted everyone to see what happened to species that got too strong. Daniel Cross was in his office when the call came. He was the vice president, a quiet man who had worked with Catherine for 8 years. He was reading reports about new colony worlds when his secretary burst through the door. "Sir, you need to see this right now," she said. Her face was white with shock. Daniel looked at the screen and felt his world collapse. Catherine was not just his president. She was his friend. They had worked together to build a better future for humanity. Now she was gone, murdered by the very aliens she had trusted. Within minutes, Daniel was in the emergency command center deep under Washington, D.C. Military leaders filled the room. Admiral Ryan Cole stood at the main screen, his face hard as stone. He was 60 years old and had spent his whole life in space. He had always believed in peace, but the look in his eyes had changed. "How many of our people were killed?" Daniel asked. "Just the president," Admiral Cole replied. "Commander Morrison survived, but he is hurt. The aliens wanted him alive to tell us what happened." "What do we know about their military strength?" Dr. Lisa Park stepped forward. She was the head of Earth's weapons research, a small woman with sharp eyes and a brilliant mind. "We have been studying their technology for years. They are strong, but they have one big weakness. They have been at peace for so long that they have forgotten how to really fight." "And we have not," said General Pete Watson. He was the head of Earth's ground forces, a big man with scars on his hands from a dozen battles on colony worlds. "Every human child knows the history of war. We have been fighting each other for thousands of years. These aliens have no idea what real warfare looks like." Daniel sat down heavily in the president's chair. It felt wrong to be there. Catherine should be sitting here, making plans for peace. Instead, he was about to make plans for war. "Sir," Admiral Cole said quietly, "we need to make a decision. The aliens are waiting for us to surrender. They think killing our leader will make us weak." Daniel looked around the room at the faces of Earth's military leaders. These were people who had spent their careers protecting humanity. They had built defenses against asteroids and pirates. They had never planned for a war against the entire galaxy, but the look in their eyes was the same look he saw in his own mirror. It was not fear. It was anger. "Get me, Commander Morrison," Daniel said. The screen flickered, and Jake Morrison appeared. He was in a medical bed on a rescue ship heading back to Earth. His chest was wrapped in bandages, but his eyes burned with rage. "Commander, I need you to tell me exactly what happened." Jake's voice was rough but clear. "They planned it from the beginning, sir. This was not a peace meeting, it was an execution. They wanted to kill President Bell and make us watch. They think we will break apart without her." "Will we?" Daniel asked. Jake was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke words that would echo across the galaxy. "Sir, I have traveled to 100 worlds. I have met aliens who can live for 1,000 years, and others who can move mountains with their minds. But I have never met anyone like humans. We do not break, we bend, and then we snap back twice as hard." Daniel stood up. Around the room, every officer was watching him. The weight of humanity's future rested on his next words. "Dr. Park, how long would it take to turn our exploration fleet into a war fleet? 6 months if we push hard. Our shipyards are already building colony ships. We can change the designs to build warships instead. General Watson, how many soldiers can we train? We have 50 million people in the reserves. Give me a year, and I can have them ready for anything. Admiral Cole, can our current ships fight theirs?" The old admiral smiled for the first time since the news came. "Sir, our ships were built to explore unknown space. That means they were built to handle anything. Their ships were built for parades and peaceful missions. In a real fight, I like our chances." Daniel walked to the big screen that showed Earth from space. Billions of people down there were crying for their president. Soon they would be crying for revenge. Send a message to every human colony. Tell them what happened here. Tell them that Earth calls for their help. "Sir," Admiral Cole said. "What? About the aliens? They are waiting for our surrender." Daniel turned back to face the room. His voice was calm but filled with iron. "Send them this message. Tell them that humanity does not surrender. Tell them that they killed the one person who could have saved them from us. Tell them that Catherine Bell wanted peace, but she is gone now. They will deal with us instead." "What should we call this operation?" Dr. Park asked. Daniel thought about Catherine's last words, the ones Commander Morrison had told him. She had said that humans do not forgive and do not forget. "Call it Operation Memory," he said, "because we are going to make sure the galaxy never forgets what happens when you murder our family." Across Earth, the news spread like wildfire. President Bell was dead, killed by aliens who thought humans were too dangerous to live free. In every city, people gathered in the streets. Some were crying, some were praying, most were angry. The aliens had made their choice. Now humanity would make theirs. In space stations around distant stars, human colonists watched the same broadcast. They saw their beloved president die and heard their new president's response. Ship captains changed course toward home. Scientists put down their research and picked up weapons designs. Teachers became soldiers. The galaxy had wanted to see what humans would do when they were cornered and alone. They were about to find out. 6 months after Catherine Bell's murder, Earth looked like a different planet. Every factory that once made cars now made weapons. Every shipyard that built exploration vessels now built warships. The blue marble that aliens had seen as peaceful was now the beating heart of a war machine. Dr. Lisa Park had not slept properly in weeks. Her laboratory worked around the clock, turning human curiosity into human vengeance. The same minds that had created faster engines and better medicines now created things that would give alien commanders nightmares. "Show me the new plasma cannons," she told her assistant, Dr. Ben Carter. He was young but brilliant. One of many scientists who had volunteered for the weapons program after seeing their president die. "They fire 3 times faster than anything the aliens have," Ben explained. "But that is not the best part. We took their own shield technology and reversed it. Instead of stopping energy, our weapons go right through their defenses," Lisa nodded. "And the bioscanners? Ready for field testing. We can identify any alien species from 1,000,000 miles away. No more surprise attacks like they used on President Bell." Across the solar system, Admiral Ryan Cole watched his new fleet take shape. The ships looked different from the peaceful vessels Earth used to build. These were built for war, with thick armor and massive weapons. But they were still human ships, which meant they were built to think and adapt. Captain Steve Murphy walked onto the bridge of his new ship, the Retribution. It was the first of the new Vengeance-class warships, designed specifically to fight aliens who thought they knew how space battles worked. "Status report," Steve said to his crew. He was 35 years old and had spent 10 years commanding exploration ships. Now he commanded humanity's most advanced weapon. "All systems ready, Captain," reported Lieutenant Amy Brooks. "The new engines are working perfectly. We can move twice as fast as their fastest ships. And the weapons? Dr. Park's plasma cannons are online. The missile systems are loaded with the new smart warheads. Each one can think for itself and pick its own target." Steve smiled grimly. The aliens had made one big mistake. They thought humans fought like they did, with honor and rules and predictable tactics. They were about to learn that humans fought to win. On Earth, Agent Claire Foster sat in a room full of computers. She was part of Earth's intelligence service, a quiet woman who could hack into any computer system in the galaxy. While the military built ships and weapons, she built something else: fear. "Sir, we have broken into their communication network," she told Director Tom Hayes. "Every message between their worlds now goes through our computers first." "What are they saying?" Claire pulled up a report on her screen. "They are scared. 3 of their member species want to quit the Council. They know we are building a fleet, but they do not know how big or how strong it is." "Good. Let them wonder. Fear is a weapon too." Tom looked at the intelligence reports coming in from across the galaxy. Human spies on alien worlds, human hackers in alien computer systems, human agents spreading stories about Earth's coming revenge. The aliens had started this war in secret. Now they would fight it in the light, where everyone could see. Meanwhile, Commander Jake Morrison was no longer lying in a medical bed. He was back on his feet and angrier than ever. President Bell had died in his arms, and he carried that weight every day. But now he had a chance to do something about it. "Operation First Strike is ready," he told President Cross over a secure video link. "We have identified the station where President Bell was killed. It is still being used by the Galactic Council. Are you sure about this, Commander? Once we attack, there is no going back." Jake's eyes were hard as steel. "Sir, they went too far the moment they killed her. This is not about going back. This is about going forward until every one of them pays for what they did." Daniel Cross looked tired. Being president during peacetime was hard enough. Being president during the build-up to a galactic war was something no human had ever done before. But Catherine had chosen him as her successor for a reason. "You have permission to proceed, Commander. Make them remember her name." 3 days later, Captain Murphy's fleet dropped out of hyperspace near Kepler Station. It was a trading post on the edge of Council space, lightly defended and full of civilian ships. The perfect target for humanity's first real message to the galaxy. "Captain," Lieutenant Brooks said, "we are being scanned by their defense platforms." "Let them scan," Steve replied. "I want them to see us coming." The alien commander of Kepler Station sent out the standard warning. "Unknown ships, you are entering restricted space. Identify yourselves or be fired upon." Captain Murphy opened a communication channel that broadcast to every ship and station in the system. "This is Captain Steve Murphy of the Earth Defense Fleet. We are here for one reason. 6 months ago, your Galactic Council murdered President Catherine Bell during a peace meeting. Today, we begin collecting payment for that crime." The alien commander was confused. "Earth ships, you are supposed to be surrendering. The Council said your species would collapse without your leader." "The Council was wrong," Steve said simply. "Retribution, open fire." The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, Kepler Station was a cloud of debris floating in space. Every alien warship in the system was destroyed. The human fleet had not lost a single ship, but the most important part was not the battle itself. It was what Captain Murphy did next. "Broadcast this message on all frequencies," he told his communications officer. This attack is dedicated to the memory of President Catherine Bell, leader of humanity and champion of peace. She wanted to be your friend. You chose to make her your victim. Now you will face her people. We are coming for all of you. News of the battle spread across the galaxy in hours. The mighty Galactic Council, rulers of 1,000 worlds, had been humiliated by a species they thought was weak and broken. On Earth, President Cross watched the reports with satisfaction. Dr. Park, how soon can we launch the main offensive? Our shipyards are working at full capacity. Give us 3 more months and we will have a fleet big enough to take on their entire military. General Watson, what about ground forces? 100 million volunteers and counting, sir. We have more people wanting to fight than we have weapons to give them. The aliens had wanted to remove humanity's leader to make them weak. Instead, they had turned every human into a soldier. They had wanted to stop humanity's expansion. Instead, they had given humanity a reason to expand into their territory. As the news of Kepler Station reached Earth, crowds gathered in the streets. They were not celebrating victory. They were promising more battles to come. On every world, where humans lived, the same scene played out. A species united in grief had become a species united in war. The galaxy was about to learn what humans really looked like when they stopped pretending to be civilized. 1 year after Catherine Bell's death, the galaxy was burning. Human fleets swept through space like hungry wolves, taking system after system from the Galactic Council. Every victory was announced with the same message. For President Bell, Captain Steve Murphy stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching another alien world surrender. This was the 15th planet his fleet had conquered in 2 months. The aliens who had once seemed so powerful now begged for mercy before the fighting even started. Captain, we are receiving a surrender signal from the surface, reported Lieutenant Amy Brooks. The Zephyrian governor wants to negotiate terms. Steve looked at the purple planet below. 1 million Zephyrians lived there, the same species that had killed his president. He felt no pity for them. Tell them the terms are simple, he said. Complete. Surrender. All military forces will be disbanded. All weapons will be handed over to human forces. Anyone who fought against us will be tried for war crimes. Sir, they are asking about civilian protection. They will be treated better than they treated President Bell. Steve's voice was cold as space. But they will never again be free to threaten humanity. On the other side of the galaxy, General Pete Watson led his ground forces across the surface of Crex 7, the Crystalline Collective's main military base. The Crystal beings had thought their underground cities would protect them. They were wrong. General, the last defense bunker has fallen, reported Colonel Mary Johnson. She was covered in dust from the battle, but her eyes were bright with victory. The enemy commander wants to speak with you. Pete walked into the crystal cave where the alien leader waited. The being looked like a living diamond, beautiful and cold. It had probably lived for 1,000 years and seen the rise and fall of many species, but it had never seen anything like humanity. General Watson, the crystal being said in a voice like breaking glass, your species fights like demons. We did not expect such savagery. You killed our president, Pete replied, simply. What did you expect, flowers and songs? We thought you would be reasonable. Most species negotiate after losing their leader. They find new ways to cooperate. Pete laughed, but there was no humor in it. You do not understand humans at all. When you hurt one of us, you hurt all of us. When you kill our leader, you declare war on our entire species. The crystal being trembled. What do you want from us? Justice. President Bell believed in peace. You murdered her for that belief. Now you will live under the peace we build, not the one you destroyed. Meanwhile, Agent Claire Foster was winning, a different kind of war. From her command center on Earth, she had turned the aliens' own technology against them. Every communication was intercepted. Every military plan was stolen. Every secret was revealed. Director Hayes, she called to her boss. I have something interesting. The Galactic Council is falling apart. Tom Hayes looked at her screen. Show me. 3 more species have tried to leave the Council this week. The machine lords want to negotiate a separate peace with humanity. The gas beings are moving their entire civilization to another galaxy. Even the Zephyrians are starting to blame each other for starting this war. Good. Fear makes them stupid. Stupid enemies make mistakes. Claire pulled up another report. We have also located the aliens who actually killed President Bell. Commander Morrison will be very interested in this. Jake Morrison was no longer the broken man who had crawled to his dying president's side. He had become something harder, something that alien species would whisper about for generations. He led the Special Forces unit that hunted down war criminals, and he was very good at his job. Commander, we have found them, Agent Foster told him over a secure channel. The 3 Zephyrian assassins who killed President Bell are hiding on Nexus Prime, the same station where they murdered her. Jake felt a cold satisfaction. How well defended is it? Not well enough. The station commander thinks the location is secret, but we have been watching them for months. Send me the details. It is time to close this circle. 2 days later, Jake's team stormed Nexus Prime. The aliens who had once felt safe in their neutral territory learned that humans did not respect the old rules. There was no safe place for the people who had killed Catherine Bell. The 3 assassins died exactly where their victim had died. Jake made sure of that. But the real war was being fought in space, where Admiral Cole commanded the largest fleet in human history. His ships moved like a steel storm through the galaxy, crushing everything the aliens sent against them. Admiral, reported Captain Murphy from his flagship. The Zephyrian Empire's main fleet is moving to intercept us at the Vega system. How many ships? Admiral Cole asked. 3,000. The largest alien fleet ever assembled. Admiral Cole smiled. And how many ships do we have? 800, sir. The aliens would have been happy with those numbers. 3,000 against 800 seemed like good odds. But they had forgotten that they were fighting humans, and humans did not fight fair. The Battle of Vega lasted 12 hours. When it was over, the Zephyrian Empire had no fleet left. Their 3,000 ships were destroyed or captured. The human fleet had lost only 37 vessels. After the battle, Admiral Cole sent a message to every alien world in the galaxy. This is Admiral Ryan Cole of the Earth Defense Fleet. Today we have destroyed the military power of the species that killed our president. But we are not finished. We will not be finished until every world that supported her murder is under human control. The message was broadcast along with video from the battle. Alien leaders across the galaxy watched human ships tear through their most powerful fleet like it was made of paper. Many of them began to understand that this war was already over. They just had not admitted it yet. On Earth, President Cross watched the reports with grim satisfaction. The aliens had thought they could remove one leader and break humanity's spirit. Instead, they had created a force that would reshape the entire galaxy. Dr. Park, he said to his weapons chief, do we still need to use the planet killer weapon? Lisa Park looked at the latest battle reports. I do not think so, sir. At this rate, we will control most of their territory within 6 months. The weapon will not be necessary. Good. Catherine would not have wanted us to destroy entire worlds unless we had no choice. What about after we win? What do we do with all these alien species? Daniel Cross thought about that question. It was the most important decision humanity would ever make. They could destroy their enemies completely, or they could build something better. We give them the peace Catherine Bell wanted, he said finally. But it will be peace on our terms, enforced by our strength. They will never again be in a position to threaten any human life. Across the galaxy, alien civilizations that had ruled for thousands of years began to fall. The Galactic Council, which had thought itself the master of the universe, was becoming nothing more than a memory. All because they had underestimated what humans would do when someone killed their family. 2 years after Catherine Bell's assassination, the war was over. The Galactic Council no longer existed. Their capital world was now called New Washington, and Earth's flag flew over the ruins of their ancient government buildings. Every species that had voted to kill humanity's president now lived under human rule. President Daniel Cross stood in what had once been the council's meeting chamber. This was the same room where Catherine had come to make peace. Now it was the center of a new galactic government with humans in charge. Admiral Ryan Cole walked up to him with a tablet full of reports. "Sir, the last Zephyrian military base has surrendered. Their emperor is requesting an audience." "Let him wait," Daniel said. "Dr. Park, what is the status of the weapon?" Dr. Lisa Park held a small device in her hands. It looked harmless, but it could destroy entire star systems. She had called it the Bell device, after their murdered president. One activation would wipe out any planet that dared to threaten humanity again. "It is ready, sir. We could test it on the Zephyrian homeworld. Send a message that no one will ever forget." Daniel looked at the device for a long moment. Catherine had believed in mercy. She had wanted peace through friendship, not fear. But she was dead because she had trusted aliens who saw kindness as weakness. "Sir," Admiral Cole said quietly, "the people of Earth are waiting for your decision. They want justice for President Bell." "And they will have it," Daniel replied, "but not the way the aliens might expect." He walked to the great window that looked out over the alien capital. City. Millions of creatures lived down there, all of them now under human protection. Some had supported the Council's decision to kill Catherine. Others had tried to stop it. Most had simply been afraid to speak up. General Pete Watson entered the room with Commander Jake Morrison. Both men looked older than they had 2 years ago. War had aged them all. "Sir," Pete said, "our ground forces control every major population center in the galaxy. The aliens are completely defenseless. If we wanted to eliminate them entirely, we could do it in a matter of weeks." Jake nodded. "The assassins who killed President Bell are all dead. Their leaders are in prison. We have proven that no one can harm humanity without paying the price." Daniel turned back to his advisors. "And what would Catherine think of that choice?" The room grew quiet. They all knew the answer. Agent Claire Foster spoke from her position at the intelligence station. "Sir, we are receiving messages from across the galaxy. Some alien species are begging for mercy. Others are promising eternal loyalty to humanity. A few are still trying to organize resistance, but they have no ships or weapons left." "What about the people of Earth? What do they want?" Claire pulled up the latest polls from Earth. 60% want complete destruction of the Zephyrian Empire. 30% want permanent human control over all alien worlds. Only 10% want any form of negotiated peace. Daniel understood why. Every human family had been affected by this war. Millions of their people had died fighting aliens who had started the conflict by murdering their beloved president. The desire for revenge was natural, but Catherine Bell had not been a natural leader. She had been an extraordinary one. "Bring in the alien representatives," Daniel said finally. The doors opened and 12 aliens entered the chamber. These were the survivors of the old Galactic Council, the ones who had voted to kill Catherine Bell. They looked broken and afraid. Their mighty civilizations had been reduced to begging for survival. Chancellor Vexmore, the Zephyrian leader who had ordered the assassination, could barely stand. His 4 arms shook as he approached the human president. "President Cross," he said in a voice like broken glass, "we surrender completely. We ask only that you spare our civilians. They did not choose this war." "You are right," Daniel said. "They did not choose this war. You did. You chose to murder a woman who came to you in peace. You chose to broadcast her death across the galaxy as a threat. You chose to underestimate what humans would do when you hurt our family." "We were wrong," admitted another alien, one of the crystal beings. "We thought your species would fragment without strong leadership. We did not understand that killing your leader would make every human into a leader." Daniel walked closer to the alien delegation. "Do you know what President Bell's last words were?" The aliens shook their heads. She told Commander Morrison that humans do not forgive and do not forget. She was right about the second part. "We will never forget what you did," but she was wrong about the first part. He gestured to Dr. Park, who approached with the Bell device. "This weapon can destroy your homeworlds in minutes. One human ship with this device could eliminate your entire species. We built it because we wanted you to understand the price of threatening humanity." The aliens stared at the device in terror. Several of them began to cry. But we are not going to use it. Daniel continued. Not today. Not ever, if you follow the new rules. He handed the device back to Dr. Park, who locked it in a secure case. From this day forward, there will be no more Galactic Council. There will be no more independent alien empires. You will all live under the protection and authority of the Human Federation, but you will live. Chancellor Vexmore looked confused. You are not going to destroy us? President Bell believed that different species could live together in peace. You killed her for that belief. Now you will live under the peace she wanted to build. The difference is that this time, humans will be in charge of keeping it. Daniel turned to his military leaders. Admiral Cole, establish human governors on every alien world. General Watson, your forces will maintain order but will not harm civilians unless they threaten human authority. Commander Morrison, your intelligence network will watch for any signs of rebellion, but the aliens will be allowed to live their lives as long as they obey human law. What should we call this new government? Admiral Cole asked. Daniel thought about Catherine's dream of a united galaxy. She had wanted cooperation between equals. That dream had died with her, but perhaps something better could be built from its ashes. Call it the Bell Accords, he said. Catherine Bell wanted peace. Now the galaxy will have peace, but it will be our peace, enforced by our strength for as long as humans exist. He walked back to the window and looked out at the alien city below. In the distance, he could see human ships patrolling the skies. Earth's flag flew from every government building. Children of a dozen different species played in parks protected by human soldiers. It was not the peace Catherine had dreamed of, but it was peace nonetheless. Sir, Commander Morrison said quietly, do you think President Bell would approve of what we have done? Daniel was quiet for a long moment. She would have preferred friendship to conquest, but she also would have understood that some species only respect strength. We gave them a chance to be our friends. They chose to be our enemies. Now they will be our subjects. And if they rebel? Daniel looked at the Bell device in Dr. Park's hands. Then they will learn why humans do not forget. Years later, historians would mark this day as the beginning of the human age. The galaxy that had once been ruled by dozens of different species was now united under one flag. There were no more wars between worlds. There were no more genocides or slave markets. There was only peace, enforced by the species that had proven what happened when you hurt their family. In schools across 1,000 worlds, alien children learned about President Catherine Bell. They learned that she had wanted to be their friend, and that her own people had loved her enough to conquer the galaxy when she was murdered. They learned that humans kept their promises, whether those promises were for peace or for war. And they learned to be very, very careful about which promise they earned.